to give birth essentially to himself. If Jesus is the Son of God and is also God, it's God siring himself. That's better than I'm my own grandpa. And then at this particular point in time, this particular God is reborn on this minor planet and sticks around for a little while and then goes back to heaven. I submit that the immensity of the universe makes the whole Christian conceit seem very silly. To think that all of that out there is just for us. And you heard a mention of the so-called anthropic principle, the idea that the universe is just exactly the way it is just because of us. I submit it is that way of necessity. It cannot be otherwise. One last thing.
Your time's up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
First of all, I have to apologize to Mr. Zindler. I was in error when I said that his time was up. I was watching the clock and I messed up. So my apologies to Mr. Zindler. It was not intentional, but I misread the clock, and that's what happened. So what we're going to do then is give him, I cut him 45 seconds off too early. I'm going to give him another 60 seconds in this next session to be able to make up for that. So I apologize. So let me give you the format now for these next sessions. These are rebuttal sessions that are going to go back and forth. I will not interrupt during this time unless I want to interrupt to give an incorrect time, which I am wont to do. So first session will be 12 minutes long, although Mr. Zindler, because of my error, will have 13 minutes. Then there will be 8 minutes for each side, and then finally 5 minutes from each side. So let's hear first from Dr. Craig.
You remember at the end of my speech I suggested that if Mr. Zindler is to convince us that atheism is true, he's got to first destroy the evidence for Christianity that I presented and then give us a case of his own that atheism is true. Unfortunately, he's declined in his opening speech to do either of those two things. Let's look first at the issue of definitions. What is Christianity after all? I explicitly stated I'm not going to debate fine points of Christian doctrine. I'm defending what C.S. Lewis called mere Christianity, that is the essential elements of Christian faith that is agreed upon by all major representatives of that faith, whether they be Catholic, Protestant, or Orthodox, and are encapsulated in the classic creeds of Christendom. Secondly, what about atheism? Well, I hate to correct him about his definition of atheism, but he's simply wrong. Atheism is not just the absence of belief in God. Let me turn to the standard work in the field of philosophy, standard reference work, the Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It quotes, according to the most usual definition, an atheist is a person who maintains that there is no God. In contrast, an agnostic maintains that it is not known or cannot be known whether there is a God. Mr. Zindler has clearly confused agnosticism with atheism. And the debate tonight is supposed to be over atheism, the proposition that there is no God. And so I invite him again, defend that point of view. I've come here to debate, give me some arguments for atheism so that I can deal with them. Madeleine Murray O'Hair, in an interview in Life magazine, said that agnostics are just atheists without guts because they're afraid to speak up. So we're not here to just talk about agnosticism. I want to hear the arguments for atheism. Why is that important? Well, simply this. Even if all the evidence that I gave for Christianity is wrong, that doesn't prove that God does not exist. Kai Nielsen, an atheist philosopher, writes, to show that an argument is invalid or unsound is not to show that the conclusion of the argument is false. All the proofs of God's existence may fail, but it still may be the case that God exists. In short, to show that the proofs do not work is not enough by itself. It may still be the case that there is a God. So he's got to give us a positive case for why God does not exist. Now, he hasn't done it in that first speech. That first speech could have been given by a Hindu, a Buddhist, an agnostic, even a deist, somebody who believes in God but doesn't believe in Christianity. There was nothing in that first speech that denied even the existence of God or even called it into question. So again, I want to invite him in the next speech to give us some evidence why we should think that atheism is true. Now, secondly, I said there is good evidence that Christianity is true. I first said the evidence points to a creator of the universe. Here he responded that the age of the universe is inconsistent with Christianity. Not at all. And here I think that the anthropic principle is very helpful. The anthropic principle tells us that in order for the universe to have in it the elements for human life, carbon-based life, the heavy elements, these must be formed in the stars. And in order for the stars to form these, you need a considerable amount of time. In order for that time to elapse, the universe must have expanded to be the dimension and breadth that it is. And therefore, far from showing the lack of care of the Creator for man, the enormous size of the universe actually bespeaks the incredible fine-tuning of the universe for the production of those very elements essential for our existence right now. So that I think that the anthropic principle to which he appeals has completely evacuated his argument of any substance. Besides, he never denied the main point of the argument. Where did the universe come from? Why does it exist? The atheist has no answer to that question. I think the Christian answer is eminently more plausible. I then suggested the evidence points to an intelligent designer of the universe, and he didn't bother to refute that point. My third argument is that the evidence points to God as a source of objective moral values. He asserts this is an ad hominem argument. Not at all. An ad hominem argument is to attack a person instead of to attack his position. My argument is what is called a meta-ethical argument. It's an argument about the very foundations of ethics. Paul Kurtz, who is an atheist and a humanist philosopher, writes that the central question about moral and ethical principles concerns their ontological foundation. If they are neither derived from God nor anchored in some transcendent ground, are they purely ephemeral? And what I'm suggesting is that the atheist is committed to the view that since there is no grounding in God of ethical values, they are just human inventions. And Mr. Zindler admits this. They're just made by human beings. And that immediately leads to moral relativism and non-objectivism. In fact, on Mr. Zindler's view, he says that atheist ethics are founded upon the principle of enlightened self-interest. The atheist believes the beer commercial, which tells us to go for the gusto since we only go around once. Now, I submit that that's a patently false view of ethics. If there is no God, then Mr. Zindler is absolutely right. Just live for total self-interest. There is no objective right and wrong. Nobody holds you accountable. So just go for all the gusto you can get. Now, of course, you have to be rather careful about this, because if you just pursue your unbridled lusts, you may hurt other people, and they in turn then may try to get you back and diminish your gusto. So the enlightened atheist will temper his pursuit of his passions and pleasures in such a way that he can maximize in the long run his own self-interest. And again, I submit to you that's just patently false. What that view means is that a Jeffrey Dahmer or a Richard Speck didn't really do anything wrong. Their mistake was that they got caught. The enlightened rapist or pedophile will only rape women or children when he knows that he can get away with it and that there's a high probability he won't get caught. That way, he can maximize his gusto in accord with his self-interest. Now, of course, if he doesn't care about going to prison, then he can just go for the gusto right now, and there's nothing the matter with that on the atheist view. And I submit that this is simply crazy. Anybody who thinks that raping little children is a morally neutral act is simply morally handicapped. J.P. Moreland, who is a Christian philosopher, has pointed out that the radical nature of the atheist thesis is concealed because we think that people will simply choose the moral life. But as he points out, this decision is totally arbitrary. He says the decision to be a Mother Teresa instead of a Hitler is very much like the decision to go to McDonald's instead of Burger King. There simply is no objective foundation for moral values. I discussed the evidence for God's revealing himself in Jesus and also for